On a storm-lashed Tuesday night in the heart of the city, two worlds were about to collide in a place no one would ever expect a greasy spoon diner called the Cornerstone. One world belonged to Leah Collins, a waitress drowning in debt, her smile a fragile mask over her exhaustion. The other belonged to William Davenport, a billionaire titan of industry, a man so powerful his name was etched onto skyscrapers, yet he sat silently in a corner booth, nursing a single black coffee, a ghost in a $1,000 suit. He was watching her, and what he saw in one single defiant moment of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shatter one life before rebuilding it in the most unimaginable way. The rain didn't just fall, it assaulted the city, hammering against the plate-glass windows of the Cornerstone diner. Each drop that slid down the pane looked like a tear mirroring the silent grief Leah Collins felt deep in her bones. It was 10 p.m., the tail end of a brutal 14-hour double shift, and the diner was a ghost town save for one man. He was always there, Tuesdays and Thursdays like clockwork. He'd take the corner booth, the one with the torn red vinyl that Gus, the owner, kept meaning to fix, and order one black coffee. He never read the paper, never touched his phone. He just sat his hands wrapped around the warm ceramic mug and watched. He was older perhaps, in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His suit, a dark charcoal wool, was worth more than every piece of equipment in the diner combined. Leah and the other staff simply called him the Watcher. Leah's feet were a geography of pain. Each step from the kitchen to the counter was a small mountain to climb. Her mind wasn't on the diner. It was thousands of miles away in a dust-choked landscape where her younger brother Daniel was serving his country. Every news report of conflict in the region sent a spike of ice through her veins. The reason she was working this double, the reason she lived in a tiny drafty apartment above the diner, the reason her dream of nursing school was just a faded brochure tucked into her dresser drawer. It was all for Daniel. Not directly, but for the mountain of medical debt their mother had left behind, a burden she refused to let him worry about. "Refill, Mr. Davenport," she asked, her voice raspy with fatigue. Her professional smile was plastered on a shield against the world. William Davenport didn't look at her. He never did. He just stared out the window, his gaze distant, lost in the chaotic symphony of the storm. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. As she poured the steaming black coffee, her hand trembled slightly. He noticed everything. He saw the faint smudges of exhaustion under her eyes, the way she favored her left foot, the worn-out soles of her sensible black shoes. He saw a young woman walking a tightrope, and he wondered what it would take for her to fall. Just as she was returning the pot to the warmer, the diner's bell chimed a cheerful, incongruous sound against the storm's fury. 3 young men in uniform shuffled in, shaking water from their jackets. They were soldiers no older than her brother, their faces etched with the same weary youth she knew so well. They looked cold, soaked to the bone, and utterly spent. They took a booth near the front, their quiet conversation a low murmur. Leah approached her notepad in hand. "Evening, gentlemen. What can I get for you?" The one with the kindest eyes, a corporal by the name of Peterson, gave her a tired smile. "Evening, ma'am. Just 3 black coffees to go, please. We've got a long drive back to the base and this weather's not letting up." "Of course," Leah said, her heart giving a painful lurch. They looked just like Daniel's friends. The same haircut, the same ramrod posture, even when they were trying to relax. She went to the counter, poured 3 large coffees into paper cups, and secured the lids. She returned to their table. "Here you are, gentlemen." Corporal Peterson pulled out a worn leather wallet. "What do we owe you?" Leah looked from his earnest face to his two comrades who were already halfway to dreamland in the booth. She thought of Daniel sleeping in a barracks, or maybe not sleeping at all, and a wave of something fierce and protective washed over her. She pushed his hand and the wallet gently away. "It's on the house," she said, her voice soft but firm. Peterson's eyes widened. "Ma'am, we can't do that." "You can and you will," she insisted. "Think of it as a thank you, from my family to yours. Just be safe out there." A look of profound gratitude passed between the soldiers. "Thank you, ma'am," Peterson said, his voice thick with sincerity. "Thank you very much." They left the bell chiming their departure, leaving behind 3 small puddles on the linoleum floor. Leah watched them go, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the diner's heating. It was a small act, a gesture that would cost her exactly $8.25 from her own tips, but it felt right. It felt necessary. She turned her brief moment of warmth instantly freezing over. From the corner booth, William Davenport was staring directly at her. For the first time, his gaze wasn't distant or lost in the rain. It was sharp, analytical, and utterly unreadable. He had seen everything. A knot of pure dread tightened in Leah's stomach. Gus had a strict, no freebies rule. If this powerful, mysterious man complained her job, the one thing keeping her head above water, could be gone in an instant. Davenport held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately placed a crisp $20 bill on the table for his $2 coffee, stood up and walked out into the storm without a single word. The bell chimed one last time, sealing the silence of the empty diner. The next morning the city was washed clean. The sun, a rare and welcome visitor, cast long shadows through the diner's windows as Leah prepped for the lunch rush. She hadn't slept well. The image of Davenport's piercing, judgmental gaze had been burned into her mind. Every time the bell over the door chimed, her stomach clenched, expecting him to walk in with Gus in tow, his finger pointed accusingly at her. Gus, the owner of the Cornerstone, was a man whose personality was a direct reflection of his diner, old, a bit greasy, but fundamentally reliable. He was a creature of habit and rules. Chief among them was rule number 1, scrawled on a faded whiteboard in the kitchen. "The only thing free in this place is the air, and I'm thinking about metering that." He arrived at 10 o'clock, sharp, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the previous night's receipts. Leah's hands were slick with sweat as she polished the silverware, the clinking of metal on metal, sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet diner. "Leah," Gus's voice boomed from behind the counter. It wasn't angry, but it held the weight of impending doom. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over her heart, thudding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Yes, Gus." He tapped a finger on the register tape. "I'm seeing 3 coffees on the order log, item number 104, voided out around 10:15 p.m. Total 825. But there's no corresponding manager override code from me." Leah's throat went dry. She could lie. She could say the machine malfunctioned or that the customers changed their minds. But looking at Gus's weary, knowing eyes, she knew it was pointless. "They were soldiers, Gus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They were soaked from the rain, looked like they hadn't slept in a week. It just felt like the right thing to do." Gus sighed a long, rattling sound. He ran a hand over his bald head. "Kid, how many times have we talked about this? This is a business, not a charity. I've got bills to pay suppliers to keep happy. You have any idea what my coffee bean costs have gone up in the last year? 20%. 20. "I know, Gus, I'm sorry. I was going to cover it from my tips." "That's not the point," He grumbled, though some of the fire went out of his voice. "The point is rules. You start bending them for one person, then another, and pretty soon the whole place falls apart." He looked at her, and his expression softened from exasperation to something more paternal. He knew about her brother. He knew about the bills. "Look, I'm not going to fire you. You're the best waitress I've got. But I can't let it slide. The $8.25 comes out of your check." "I understand," Leah said, the relief that washed over her so immense it almost made her dizzy. It was followed quickly by the familiar bitter sting of reality. $8.25. To some it was nothing. To her it was a box of pasta, the copay on a prescription, a gallon of gas. It was a tangible piece of her survival. She retreated to the kitchen, leaning against the cool metal of the refrigerator and closing her eyes. Her act of kindness had a price tag. A small one, but it was there. And as she stood there, a worse thought crept in. How did Gus know to check the log so carefully? He usually just skimmed the totals. Then she remembered the man in the corner. The watcher? William Davenport. Had he called Gus? Had he seen her small act of charity and decided to report it to enforce the rules from his lofty, silent perch? The idea was chilling. That a man of such obvious wealth and power would concern himself with 3 cups of coffee. It felt petty cruel, even. The image of him changed in her mind. He was no longer just a mysterious observer. He was a silent executioner of rules, a man who would watch a drowning person and note that they were swimming in a no-swimming zone. The lunch rush came and went, a frantic blur of orders and plates. Leah moved on autopilot, her smile a little tighter, her movements a little more mechanical. She scanned the booths constantly, but the corner booth remained empty. Davenport didn't appear. For the first time, his absence was more unnerving than his presence. The day dragged on. As she was wiping down tables for the dinner crowd, the mail carrier dropped off the diner's mail, along with the letters for the apartments upstairs. She saw one for herself, a crisp, cream-colored envelope. It looked official, important. It bore a logo she didn't recognize, a stylized DH in a sharp, modern font. She tucked it into her apron pocket, her mind too preoccupied with her budget and the phantom of William Davenport to give it much thought. She'd open it later after her shift, when she could finally sit down and face whatever new demand or bill it contained. For now she had tables to set customers to serve, and a meager pool of tips to count. The price of kindness, she thought bitterly, was always paid by those who could least afford it. The climb up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment was, as always, the final boss of her day. Each step groaned under her weight, a weary complaint she knew all too well. Her apartment wasn't much a studio that was more of a glorified closet with a hot plate and a window that overlooked a brick wall. But it was hers. It was her sanctuary from the noise, the smells, and the forced smiles of the diner below. She dropped her keys into a small ceramic bowl by the door, the same bowl her mother had kept for her keys. Kicking off her worn-out shoes was a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. She sat on the edge of her lumpy mattress, the official-looking envelope crinkling in her apron pocket. For a moment she just held it, feeling the weight of the thick, expensive paper. It was probably just another escalated collection notice, dressed up to look intimidating. With a sigh, she tore it open. The letterhead was heavy embossed with the same DH logo, and the words, Davenport Holdings. Her blood ran cold. Davenport. It was from him, or at least his company. Why was it a complaint, a legal notice about the coffee? Her hands trembled as she unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It wasn't a complaint. It was far, far worse. The language was dense, full of legal jargon that swam before her tired eyes, but the key phrases leaped out at her like predators from the tall grass of the text, pursuant to the acquisition of the property located at 451 West Elm Street. Effective immediately, all current tenancy agreements are hereby terminated. A grace period of 30 days from the date of this notice. Vacate the premises to allow for scheduled demolition and subsequent redevelopment. Demolition. The word echoed in the sudden roaring silence of her small apartment. They had bought the building, the Cornerstone Diner, the apartments above it, everything. And they were going to tear it all down. She wasn't just losing her job, she was losing her home. Leah read the letter again, and then a third time, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. But they remained cold and immutable. 30 days. She had 30 days to find a new job and a new place to live in a city that was notoriously unforgiving. The panic that had been simmering under the surface all day erupted into a full-blown inferno. She felt the walls of her tiny apartment closing in the air, becoming thick and unbreathable. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. The timing was too perfect, too cruel. The silent man in the corner booth hadn't just reported her for giving away coffee. That was a petty grievance. This was a declaration of war. He had observed her small, desperate act of kindness and had responded by dropping a bomb on her entire life. It was a show of power so disproportionate, so monstrous, that she could barely comprehend it. He wasn't just enforcing a rule. He was erasing the entire game board. Her mind raced. What about Gus? The diner had been his entire life passed down from his father. What about the other tenants? The elderly Mrs. Gable in 2B, the young couple with the baby in 3A. Their lives were being upended too, all collateral damage in a war she didn't even know she was fighting. A new feeling began to bubble up through the fear and panic rage. A hot, searing anger that burned away her exhaustion. Who was this man, William Davenport, to hold such absolute power over the lives of ordinary people? To sit silently in a booth, absorbing the atmosphere of a place, only to turn around and sign a piece of paper that would obliterate it from existence. She thought of the soldiers. She had given them a moment of warmth, a simple gesture of respect and humanity. And in return, the universe, in the form of a cold-eyed billionaire, was evicting her from her life. The irony was so bitter it tasted like poison. She smoothed the letter out on her small, wobbly table. Davenport Holdings, it read. A name synonymous with gleaming skyscrapers, corporate takeovers, and ruthless efficiency. A name that until tonight had meant nothing to her. Now it was the name of her destroyer. Leah stood up and walked to the window, staring at the uninspiring brick wall just a few feet away. It felt symbolic, a dead end. But as the anger continued to burn, it forged something new inside her. Resilience, defiance. She was not going to be just another piece of rubble when the demolition crews arrived. She didn't know how, and she didn't know what it would accomplish, but she was going to find out why. She was going to face the man in the corner booth, not as a waitress, but as a person whose life he was trying to erase. She would not go quietly. The watcher had made his move. Now it was her turn. The next 2 days were a blur of shared misery. The news of the demolition swept through the building like a contagion. Gus was a thundercloud of fury and despair, slamming pots in the kitchen and cursing the name Davenport under his breath. Mrs. Gable from 2B was in tears, talking about the 40 years she'd lived in her small apartment. The young couple in 3A looked shell-shocked, their faces pale with the stress of finding a new baby-friendly home on such short notice. Leah was the epicenter of their collective grief, offering comfort she didn't feel, and reassurances She didn't believe. Amidst the chaos, a single burning question propelled her. Why this building? Why this diner? It wasn't a prime piece of real estate. It was a worn-out C-list property on a street that had seen better days. A corporate giant like Davenport Holdings could acquire entire city blocks. This felt personal. It felt targeted. Armed with this conviction, Leah spent her breaks and late nights not searching for apartments, but searching for William Davenport. The public library became her command center. Hunched over a humming computer terminal, she typed his name into the search bar and fell down a rabbit hole. The public image of William Davenport was exactly what she expected. He was a legend in the financial world, a titan of industry, a modern-day Midas. Articles lauded his aggressive business strategies and his uncanny ability to forecast market trends. He was born to modest means, built his empire from the ground up, and was notoriously private and ruthless. Photos showed him at galas, his face a mask of stern indifference, always alone. But as she dug deeper past the business articles and into the society pages and archives, a different story began to emerge. It was the story of a woman named Catherine Davenport, his wife. Catherine had been the heart of his world, the articles suggested. Where William was cold steel, she was radiant warmth. She was a celebrated philanthropist, a patron of the arts, and the driving force behind the Davenport Foundation, a massive charitable organization. But her photo was always accompanied by dates. Born 1958, died 2024. She had passed away just over a year ago, after a long battle with cancer. Leah felt a pang of something she didn't expect sympathy. The man in the corner booth wasn't just a corporate monster. He was a grieving widower. The timeline fit. His silent vigils in the diner had started about 6 months after his wife's death. Then she found it. A small buried article from a local lifestyle magazine published nearly a decade ago. It was a feature on power couples of the city, and it included a brief, rare interview with Catherine Davenport. Near the end, the interviewer asked her about their early days. Catherine's quote was accompanied by a grainy black-and-white photo of a much younger William and a luminous Catherine laughing on a park bench. "Oh, we had nothing back then," the quote read. "Just dreams and a shared love for bad coffee. There was this little diner, the Cornerstone, over on West Elm. We must have planned half of William's first business venture on the back of their paper napkins. He'd have a black coffee, I'd have a cherry pie. We'd sit there for hours. It was our place." Leah's breath caught in her throat. Our place. It all clicked into place, but the picture it formed was even more monstrous than before. The Cornerstone wasn't a random target. It was a sanctuary of memory. He wasn't just a grieving widower. He was a man so consumed by his grief that he would rather destroy the physical remnants of his happiest memories than live in a world where he had to see them without her. He wasn't just tearing down a building. He was tearing out a page of his own history, and he didn't care who was crushed in the process. His silent visits weren't a vigil. They were a farewell tour. He was saying goodbye to the ghost of his wife before calling in the bulldozers. The knowledge settled in Leah's gut like a block of ice. It was a motive so profoundly selfish, so wrapped in a cocoon of personal pain, that it completely disregarded the lives of anyone else. Her anger from the other night returned, but it was different now. It was colder, clearer. This wasn't just about her job or her apartment anymore. It was about defending a memory that wasn't even hers. It was about standing up for the laughing girl in the photograph, the one who loved cherry pie and bad coffee, whose husband was about to desecrate the monument to their love. She now knew the why, and this knowledge gave her a dangerous, terrifying idea. She couldn't fight Davenport Holdings and their army of lawyers. But maybe she could talk to William Davenport, the man, the widower. She would have to get past the corporate fortress he had built around himself. It was a near impossible task, a true David and Goliath scenario. But looking at the smiling face of Catherine Davenport on the screen, Leah knew she had to try. She wasn't just fighting for her future anymore. She was fighting for his past. The Davenport Holdings headquarters was not a building, it was a statement. A gleaming shard of glass and steel that tore a hole in the sky. It was designed to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. And as Leah Collins stood in the cavernous marble lobby, her worn waitress uniform hidden under her only decent coat, she felt exactly that. Getting here had taken all the courage she possessed. After 2 days of being turned away by receptionists and security guards, she'd found her opening. A catering delivery van was making a stop for a large corporate lunch on the 50th floor. In a moment of pure, unadulterated nerve, she'd slipped into the service elevator with the catering crew, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. From there, she'd found her way to the 75th floor, the executive wing, by simply looking like she belonged. Now she stood outside the double mahogany doors that bore a simple, elegant brass plate, William Davenport, CEO. This was it. The final gate. Taking a breath so deep it made her dizzy, she pushed the doors open and walked in. The office was bigger than her entire apartment building. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a godlike view of the city below. William Davenport stood before it, his back to her, looking down on the world he owned. He was on the phone, his voice, the same low, authoritative rumble she remembered from his rare orders at the diner. No, the offer is final. Liquidate their assets by end of day. I don't care about the bored sentimentality. He said, his voice cold as ice. He ended the call and stood in silence for a moment, before speaking without turning around. The catering is for the 50th floor. You're lost. I'm not with the catering, Mr. Davenport. Leah said, her voice surprisingly steady. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing, as he recognized her. The shock on his face was fleeting, replaced instantly by a mask of cold fury. Security, he barked into an intercom on his desk. How did you get in here? My name is Leah Collins. I'm a waitress at the Cornerstone Diner, she said, taking a step forward. And I live in the apartment in 3C. You're evicting me. 2 large security guards burst into the room, moving towards her purposefully. Wait, Davenport commanded, holding up a hand. The guard stopped flanking the doorway. He looked Leah up and down, a flicker of something annoyance curiosity in his eyes. You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for trespassing before you are thrown out of my building. This was her one shot. She couldn't afford to be angry or accusatory. She had to reach the man, not the CEO. I'm not here to ask you to stop. She began the words she'd rehearsed 100 times, spilling out. I'm not here to plead for my home or my job. I'm here to ask you a question. Why? Why that specific building? It's not valuable real estate. It's not a strategic acquisition. So why the Cornerstone? Davenport's jaw tightened. My business decisions are not your concern. This isn't a business decision. She pressed her voice, gaining strength. I read about you. I read about your wife. I read about Catherine. The mention of his wife's name was like a physical blow. He flinched, a barely perceptible tremor that ran through his powerful frame. The mask cracked. For a second, she saw not the billionaire titan, but the grieving man from the corner booth. You have no right to speak her name, he hissed, his voice dangerously low. She said it was your place. Leah continued, her heart pounding. She was walking on a minefield, but she couldn't turn back. She said you planned your future on the back of its paper napkins. She loved their cherry pie. You loved their bad coffee. Each word was a precise strike. Davenport stared at her, his composure completely shattered. The rage was gone, replaced by a raw, gaping wound of pain. He looked past her, his eyes unfocused, seeing a ghost in his opulent office. "That place is a memory." He finally whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion he had clearly kept locked away for over a year. "And memories are ghosts. They haunt you. I go there and I see her in that booth. I can hear her laughter. I can smell her perfume. I can't live in a city where that ghost exists on every corner. I need it gone. I need the silence." It was a confession torn from the deepest, most selfish part of his grief. He was going to demolish a building, ruin lives, and render people homeless, all to quiet the echoes in his own head. The sheer audacity of it, the scale of the destruction he was willing to cause to soothe his own pain, was breathtaking. "So you destroy it?" Leah asked, her voice now filled with a sorrow that surprised her. "You bulldoze the place where you fell in love, where Catherine was happy. You think that will silence her ghost? Or will it just prove that you've forgotten everything she was—" She took another step closer, her voice dropping. "I saw you at the diner, Mr. Davenport. I saw you watching. You saw me give those soldiers coffee. You probably thought it was a foolish, sentimental gesture, a violation of the rules. And you're right, it was. But I did it because my brother is a soldier, and it's my way of feeling connected to him, of honoring him. It was a small act of kindness in a world that feels very cruel right now." She looked him directly in the eye. "Catherine Davenport, from everything I read, spent her life performing acts of kindness. The Davenport Foundation has helped thousands of people. What you're doing, destroying a piece of your own heart because it hurts too much, that doesn't honor her. It dishonors her memory. The ghost you're trying to destroy isn't Catherine. It's you, the man you used to be when you were with her." Silence descended upon the vast office, broken only by the distant hum of the city. The security guards stood frozen, unsure of what they were witnessing. William Davenport, the man who moved markets with a single word, was speechless. He stared at the young waitress who had breached his fortress and held up a mirror to his soul. "Get out!" he finally choked out, turning his back on her to face the window once more. It wasn't a command of anger, but a plea of dismissal. A man who needed to be alone. Leah knew she had said all she could. She turned and walked out of the office, past the stunned guards, her body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. She didn't know if she had made things better or 1,000 times worse. But she had spoken her truth. The rest was up to the ghost in the glass tower. The journey back from the glass tower was a disembodied haze. Leah barely remembered the elevator ride, the walk through the marble lobby, or the bus trip back to her neighborhood. The adrenaline that had propelled her through William Davenport's mahogany doors had evaporated, leaving behind a chilling residue of dread. As the hours ticked by, her act of defiance felt less like a courageous stand and more like a catastrophic miscalculation. She hadn't just confronted a man. She had provoked a beast poking at the rawest, most painful part of his soul. What was to stop him from accelerating their eviction out of pure spite? For 3 agonizing days, a suffocating silence descended upon 451 West Elm Street. It was the silence of a held breath of a world waiting for the axe to fall. The ticking clock of their 30-day notice seemed to grow louder with each passing hour. Leah saw the despair in the way Gus moved through his diner, no longer with purpose, but with the heavy shuffling gait of a man presiding over a wake. He began packing the small back office, carefully wrapping decades-old photographs of his father behind the counter, each movement a quiet admission of defeat. The joyful sounds from the young couple's apartment in 3A were muted, and Leah hadn't seen Mrs. Gable leave her apartment at all. The entire building was grieving. Leah forced herself into a routine of grim practicality. Between her shifts serving a dwindling number of customers, she sat at her wobbly kitchen table, circling apartment listings she couldn't afford, and job ads for positions she was overqualified for. Every circle of her pen felt like another step away from her dream, another link in the chain, pulling her back down into the depths she had fought so hard to escape. She replayed the confrontation in her mind, 1,000 times dissecting every word. Had she been too harsh, too presumptuous? Had she, in her attempt to save them, merely sealed their fate? The hope she had carried into that office had curdled into a bitter, gnawing fear. Then, on the fourth morning, a Thursday, the silence was broken. A sleek, black town car, identical to the one that had delivered their collective death sentence, purred to a stop at the curb. Leah was wiping down the counter when she saw it, and her heart plummeted into her stomach. Gus came out from the kitchen, his face pale. This was it. The lawyers were back, likely with papers to expedite the process to punish them for her audacity. They stood together behind the counter, a silent, unified front bracing for the final blow. The car door opened, but the woman who emerged was not the severe, sharp-edged lawyer they remembered. This woman was older, perhaps in her early 60s, with silver-threaded hair, styled in an elegant but gentle sweep. She wore a tailored suit, but her posture was open, her expression calm. She walked into the diner, the bell chiming her arrival, and her eyes clear and perceptive, took in the somber atmosphere before landing on Leah and Gus. "Good morning," she said. Her voice possessed a warmth that was utterly disarming. "I'm looking for Mr. Gus Pappas and Ms. Leah Collins." "That's us," Gus said, his voice a low growl. His arms crossed over his chest. The woman offered a small, reassuring smile. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am the executive director of the Davenport Catherine Foundation." The name hung in the air, electric and confusing. Not Davenport Holdings, the corporate monolith that was destroying them, but the Davenport Catherine Foundation. Catherine's legacy. A charitable organization. Leah and Gus exchanged a look of profound bewilderment. "Mr. Davenport asked me to come speak with you both," Eleanor continued, approaching the counter. She placed a heavy leather-bound portfolio on its surface and unclasped it. "There has been a significant change of plans regarding this property. He has reconsidered his position." Gus snorted. "Reconsidered? Does that mean we get 45 days to get out instead of 30? Eleanor's smile didn't falter. "No, Mr. Pappas," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It means the demolition has been cancelled. Permanently." The word seemed to warp the very air in the diner. Leah felt a wave of dizziness gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Gus stared, his jaw slack, his gruff facade completely shattered. "Cancelled," he whispered, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "Entirely," Eleanor confirmed. She opened the portfolio and unrolled a large architectural blueprint across the counter, weighing down the corners with salt and pepper shakers. "In fact, it's quite the opposite. Mr. Davenport, through the foundation, has decided to personally finance a complete restoration and renovation of the entire building." The blueprint showed the cornerstone diner, but it was a version from Gus's wildest dreams. The layout was more efficient. The cracked floors were replaced with warm hardwood. The aging kitchen equipment was swapped for gleaming stainless steel. But the soul of the place, the long counter, the positioning of the booths, was lovingly preserved. The diner's historical character will be maintained and enhanced, Eleanor explained, her finger tracing the new designs. Gus, the foundation, would like to offer you a lifetime contract as the salaried general manager. Your new compensation package would include a substantial salary, full health and dental benefits, and paid vacation. All financial responsibilities for the business, the suppliers, the utilities, the upkeep would be handled by the foundation. You would simply be paid to do what you love without the burden. Gus stared at the plans, his eyes tracing the lines as if in a trance. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the paper, the tough, calloused finger of a man who had worked his entire life, now tracing the map of an impossible dream. He sank onto a nearby stool, his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. Eleanor turned a page in her portfolio, revealing floor plans for the apartments upstairs. The residences will also be completely renovated. New wiring, new plumbing, modern kitchens and bathrooms. All current tenants will be given first right to return to their units at their current rental rate. That rate will then be frozen by legal contract for the next 10 years. Leah felt a gasp escape her lips. It wasn't just a reprieve, it was a gift of security so profound she could barely comprehend it. Mrs. Gable wouldn't have to leave her home. The young family would have a safe, beautiful apartment to raise their baby in. Then Eleanor Vance turned her full attention to Leah. Her kind eyes held a depth of understanding that made Leah feel seen in a way she never had before. From the portfolio, Eleanor produced a single thick, cream-colored envelope and handed it to her. "This," she said softly, "is for you." Leah's name was written on the front in elegant script. Her hands shook as she opened the flap. Inside there were 2 documents. The first was a formal letter embossed with the foundation's logo. As she scanned the typed words, her world tilted on its axis. It was an official letter of award for the inaugural Davenport Catherine Foundation Nursing Scholarship. It was a full unconditional scholarship to the city's premier nursing school, covering every conceivable cost: tuition, books, uniforms, lab fees. Furthermore, it included a generous monthly stipend for living expenses explicitly designed to allow her to focus solely on her studies without the need for employment. The faded brochure in her dresser drawer, the symbol of her deferred dream, flashed in her mind. This letter was not a dream. It was real. It was tangible. The crushing weight she had carried on her shoulders for years simply dissolved, leaving her feeling dizzy and weightless. Beneath the official letter was a single sheet of heavy, personal stationery, folded in half. The handwriting was bold and black, instantly recognizable. "Leah, you came to my office and held up a mirror. In my arrogance, I didn't want to look, but after you left, I could not see anything else. You were right. The man I had become was a stranger, and he was dishonoring the memory of the one person who mattered. Grief is a poor architect. It builds walls and tears down beautiful things. I instructed my security team to pull the surveillance footage from the diner for the past 6 months. I told myself it was for due diligence. In truth, I was looking for a reason to prove you wrong, to justify my actions. I found the opposite. I watched all of it. I saw you give your own packed dinner to a homeless man on a cold night. I saw you sit for 20 minutes after your shift comforting an elderly woman who was crying in a booth long after everyone else had gone home. I saw you slip a $20 bill from your own meager tips into the pocket of a young mother who came up short on her bill. I saw you work day after day with a grace and resilience that humbled me. Your kindness is not a weakness or a foolish sentiment. It is a superpower. One my wife possessed in abundance, and one I had forgotten existed. I also made a call. I have resources, as you know. I found out your brother is Sergeant Daniel Collins' 2nd Battalion. I served in that same branch when I was a young man, a fact I rarely share. It was a lifetime ago before all of this. Please extend to him my deepest respect and gratitude for his service. His sacrifice and yours should be rewarded, not punished. Catherine would have loved you. She would have seen your light immediately. This scholarship, this entire project, is in her name, but it is from me. It is my attempt to start building again, instead of tearing things down. Go be the nurse you were always meant to be. The world needs more people like you. Sincerely, William Davenport. The tears came then hot and unstoppable. They weren't tears of sadness or even just relief. They were tears of profound, soul-shaking catharsis. She sank onto the stool next to Gus, the letter clutched in her hand. He had seen her. All those months sitting in his silent corner, he hadn't just been a ghost haunting his own memories. He had been a witness. He had seen past the tired waitress, past the uniform and the practiced smile, and had seen the truth of her. Her small, invisible acts of compassion, the things she did when she thought no one was looking, had been her ultimate defense. They had saved her. They had saved them all. 6 months felt like a lifetime. The autumn that had brought the eviction notice had bled into a harsh winter of uncertainty and renovation, and now a hopeful spring was painting the city in tentative shades of green. For Leah Collins, the change of seasons was a mirror to the transformation of her own world. She no longer measured her days in double shifts and aching feet, but in lecture halls, clinical rotations, and the dense, satisfying weight of medical textbooks. The Cornerstone Diner, shrouded for months behind scaffolding and plywood, was finally ready to be reborn. On the eve of its grand reopening, Leah found herself walking down West Elm Street, drawn by an invisible thread. The construction barriers were gone. In their place stood a building that was both a stranger and an old friend. The brickwork, once grimy with a century of city life, had been cleaned and repointed, glowing with a warm, rosy hue in the late afternoon sun. The windows were vast and clear, and the new neon sign, a perfect homage to the flickering original, was poised to flood the street with its welcoming light. It was the soul of the old diner, housed in a body that was strong and new. Leah's life had been similarly restored. The constant grinding anxiety about money had been replaced by a focused determination. She was excelling in her nursing program, her innate empathy, now buttressed by knowledge and skill. The quiet hours she once would have spent trying to steal a few moments of sleep between shifts were now spent in the university library, the silence a productive hum rather than an oppressive weight. She had traded the clatter of plates for the steady rhythm of a beating heart in a stethoscope, and she knew with a certainty that was bone deep that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her correspondence with William Davenport remained sparse, but significant. A few weeks ago, an email had arrived with the subject line, "An inquiry." In it, he had formally asked about her academic progress. She had replied with a short, professional update on her grades and recent clinical experience. His response came within the hour. "Excellent. Catherine always said the most important investment is in people." It appears she was, as usual, correct. There was no warmth precisely, but there was a current of profound respect running beneath the surface of his words. He was no longer the watcher. He had become a distant, almost silent guardian. The night of the reopening, the Cornerstone was alive. It vibrated with a joyous energy that Leah had never felt within its walls before. Laughter and conversation bounced off the new pressed tin ceiling. The air, once thick with the smell of stale grease, was now a tantalizing mix of Gus's famous chili fresh brewed coffee and something else, the clean, crisp scent of a fresh start. Gus, looking a decade younger and impossibly dapper, in a starched white shirt and black bow tie, was a whirlwind of motion, directing his new staff with a booming voice full of pride. He caught Leah's eye from across the room and beamed a genuine face-splitting grin that erased the weary lines she had known so well. He bustled over, wiping his hands on a clean apron. "Can you believe it, kid?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at this place. Look at these people." Leah's gaze swept the room. She saw Mrs. Gable in her favorite booth, showing off photos of her grandchildren on a brand-new smartphone to the young couple from 3A, whose baby was now old enough to be mesmerized by the shiny new jukebox in the corner. Everyone was there, a testament to the community that had refused to be broken. "It's incredible," Gus, Leah said, her voice catching. "It's perfect. It's more than perfect. It's a miracle," he corrected her gently. "And you were the spark." He clapped her on the shoulder, his calloused hand a warm, paternal weight, before being called away to greet the mayor who had come for the ribbon cutting. As Leah stood soaking it all in, a delivery man, in a smart uniform, navigated the crowd, holding a floral arrangement so large it was almost comical. It was a breathtaking cascade of white lilies, cream-colored roses, and delicate greenery. He checked the tag and then made a beeline for Gus, who in turn pointed him directly to Leah. "This is for you, miss," the man said, presenting the bouquet. A hush fell over the immediate area as people turned to look. Flustered, Leah took the small, heavy cardstock envelope attached, her fingers now steady and sure from weeks of practicing injections and taking vitals, trembled slightly as she opened it. The card was simple, the message written in the same strong, decisive hand she remembered from the note that had changed her life. To new beginnings. W.D. Leah closed her eyes for a moment, clutching the card. It was a final seal on a promise, a quiet acknowledgement from the man in the glass tower that the work of building was now complete. He wouldn't come here, she knew. This place was no longer his sanctuary of grief. He had given it back to the world, back to them. Tucking the card safely into her pocket, she navigated through the happy throng, her path leading her inevitably to the back of the diner. To the corner booth. It was unoccupied, a quiet island in the sea of celebration. The vinyl was a deep, unblemished crimson. The Formica tabletop gleamed under the soft pendant lighting. It was just a table, just a booth. But to her, it was an altar, the place where two worlds had collided. She ran her hand over the smooth, cool surface, and for a fleeting, vivid moment, she could almost see them, a fiercely ambitious young man with holes in his shoes, and a brilliant, vibrant girl with a laugh that could light up a room, their heads bent together, sketching out a future on a paper napkin. She could almost feel the phantom presence of the silent, grieving billionaire who had come to say goodbye. Her brother Daniel's last letter was tucked in her purse. He was due to come home in 2 months, his tour finally over. She had already pictured the moment she would bring him here. She would slide into this very booth across from her hero, and she would tell him the whole story. The story of a stormy night, 3 cups of free coffee, and a desperate act of defiance that had somehow, against all odds, saved them all. It was a story about how the deepest wounds could be healed, not by erasing the past, but by having the courage to build a better future upon its foundations. It was a story that proved that kindness was never a weakness, but the most powerful force for change in the world. And it had all started right here in this corner booth. The story of Leah Collins and William Davenport is a powerful reminder that we are all connected in ways we can't possibly see. It shows us that Beneath the surface of titles, bank accounts and uniforms, there is a shared human experience of love loss and the need for compassion. Leah's simple act of kindness wasn't a transaction. It was a broadcast of her character. It was a signal that rippled out and reached a man lost in his own grief, reminding him of the person he once was and the legacy he was meant to uphold. It proves that you never know who is watching and what battles they might be fighting in their own corner booth. What did you think of Leah's courage to confront Mr. Davenport? Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that had unexpectedly large consequences? We would love to read your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and remind us of the incredible power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.